Okay, great.
That might be better.
Right. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and click to the next one.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
There we go.
Good morning. First of all, thank you for allowing the Alabama chapter ASSP to come to JSU again. We enjoyed it last year, and I'm sure we're going to enjoy it this year. If you would, could you please stand and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Randy, would you lead us this morning in the prayer?
Dear Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to gather together. We thank you for this opportunity to share, to help, to mentor, to discuss. And we ask you just to bless us, bless our companies, bless the employees in our care. We thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for ASSP. We thank you for the food that's about to be presented. All things we thank you. All things we do praise you. In thy most holy name, amen.
Next slide.
Okay.
I'll introduce myself. I'm connected to the Alabama Safety Program. I am president of the Alabama chapter. So I'd like to say thanks again to the JSU student section for allowing us here. I'm going to go over my stuff real quick because obviously we're not computer experts, so we're having fun going back and forth between Chris's computer, my presentation and so forth. So I won't take that long. Skip that one, we'll come back to it. All right. Again, thank you for JSU students and staff for having us at the university. Any announcements for the students at all? One thing I will announce is this year, Safety 2025 is in Orlando, Florida. I went to San Antonio 2 years ago. You got 1.7 CEUs. This year for attending the conference is down to 1.5. You go to 2 one-day sessions, the pre-conference courses, you'll actually get more credit than actually attending the conference. If you go to 3-day course down there, you actually get more credits than the actual conference itself. So be aware you're gonna have to somehow come up with the additional credits you used to get at the conference that you now lost. What they've done is they've taken time out of giving you CEUs and let you go down to the wonderful 650 vendor area, and that time is not considered part of the CEU process that you get credit for. Next. Yes.
In terms of this conference, what Tom was talking about is basically points that you guys see us pay.
Yeah.
For students, you know, if you get the opportunity to go, there's a lot of sessions, there's a lot of networks, there's a lot of ASSP activities that pulls you together. Oh, by the way, I'm Randy Eastling. I'm the area director for ASSP for Alabama and Mississippi, and you know, manage the safety program. I've supervised field operations for Safe State, but in terms of going to the conference, you get the opportunity. The one thing with it is there is an ongoing career fair. You know, where you can see what jobs are available. You can do like mock interviews. You can do resume review, those type of things. So there is a lot of activities focused on, you know, you as a professional, finding employment, changing jobs, you know, that type of thing. Career, you know, there seems to be a lot of jobs around. A lot of them sound good, a lot of them are better than others, you know, it just sort of depends on the career track you're looking at. You kind of get started and you kind of develop experience in a given area. And sometimes you want to think about having a broad experience over a lot of areas, otherwise, you know, I would say the guy in coal mines, you know, for the rest of my life, or, you know, whatever. So there's those things. So, and with that, I'm taking the rest of your.
Oh, that's fine.
I know there will be at least one really, really cool speaker at ASSP this year too. So.
Yeah, Justin will be there speaking. Yeah, so some of the training opportunities that come up, let me see if I updated this. I did. Okay. Actually I did. Fall protection is over with, but next week, something called RiskCon. It's going to be AGC over in Irondale, right off of 459. You know where Nick Saban's Mercedes is, the other way across the street.
The room the chapter meetings are always in.
Room chapter meeting is always in, which is the second room down the hallway to the left.
Mhm.
If you get an opportunity to go, there's some interesting presentations going on, including one put on by Randy, but the one I'm really interested in here is there's one on cybersecurity. They're going to talk about from a corporate and personal standpoint, cybersecurity. It is free, so if you get an opportunity to get over there on the 26th, register for it through AGC's website, and it is free.
Basically, you take what's on the back of there, scan up the email, if there's not an online registration.
So anybody who needs one of these, go ahead. Central Alabama Construction Conference is coming up. It's free. Registration is kind of interesting. You go to UAB, you can't find it on the Deep South Center for Occupational Safety and Health. If you put in Google, Deep South Center for Occupational Safety and Health, Central Alabama Conference will actually take you right to the site and you can register. It is free. It's both construction and general industry. They will feed you breakfast, they'll feed you lunch.
So Tom, I wanted to mention something. Our students went last year and some of them want to go again this year. Let's make sure we get all of that information before we go. It looks like it's going to be on a Thursday.
Yep.
Saying we are having construction safety this semester. So that would be a really good opportunity there for y'all to go to. Y'all know where it's at there.
Yeah, some places before Hyundai Training Center, March 20th is the date.
Yeah, so let's make sure we get on that.
If you get a chance to go to Puerto Rico, March 5th to the 7th, the Southeast Regional Symposium is in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and that's put on UAB Deep South Center for Occupational Safety and Health. And there's basically calling it the State of Science this year. You can register through UAB. Next slide, please. April 16th and 17th is the Region 4 ASSP conference. It's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. If any of you get an opportunity to go, Randy will be there before the conference for the special meeting for the chapters for
Operating council.
operating meeting. July 20th.
Reductions for students, there is a special line. I wish I could remember what it is. There's other things that you may be able to talk to the region about in terms of we have to monitor data for things, all those lines where.
Wednesday and Thursday, right? So Wednesday and Thursday, right?
Wednesday or-
Yeah,
Wednesday and Thursday.
they gave us a reduced rate when we went down to Tuscaloosa. So
Did
yeah, they were gracious enough there. So if we'll see what interest there is in that.
Yeah, and it's
I'm on the planning committee and I'm trying to remember how much it cost.
Yeah,
I
I
know
got
it went up this year for general attendance,
you.
but I don't remember.
Yeah. and registration through.
The student fee,
Okay.
I can't remember if it's like, the student fee is like $100 or if it's $100. It's something.
Yeah, okay.
And registrations to Region 4 ASSP. The ASSP Leadership Conference is the day before the main conference, Safety 2025 down in Orlando, which is the 22nd through 24th. Leader Conference is the 21st. To get an opportunity to attend that. Randy and I will both be going to that. Then, of course, the Alabama Governor's Safety and Health Conference is coming up August 23rd through 27th at the Prodigal Resort down in Orange Beach. Always a great conference. People love the beach. Next slide. Chapter updates. This is just a list of what we got going on. On March 28th, we're going to do a noise presentation from Dr. Georgia Rhodes, and she's doing an audiometric custom active and passive protection for hearing protection devices. That should be interesting. We're open right now for April 11th. OSHA was going to do it, but they've been restricted from doing outreach right now, so they had to back out. So we're looking to put in a new presentation for that. May 16th will be our basically members recognition luncheon for those who have 10, 15, 20, 25 years of ASSP membership will be invited to this luncheon. We'll hand out plaques, thanking them for their membership, put on a nice meal. June 20th is when everything changes. The president, vice president, executive committee for our chapter changes over to the new group, whoever's coming in. So if you are interested in being on the executive committee for the Alabama chapter, let us know. So far, it looks like it's going to be the same executive committee moving forward again. Next slide. If you are interested in want to being on the executive committee, Randy, I contact him. or you can contact the executive committee, Justin, myself, Vincent, Scott, Alan. Then sections, which is the Montgomery, Opelika, Auburn, West Alabama, Tuscaloosa sections will also have their elections as well. So if you're interested in a section executive committee, which is just basically the chairman and secretary, let the chairmans for those areas, it'd be Tina Arthur Petersworth is now her last name, for Auburn, Opelika, and Montgomery, and then Matt Hollib is the West Alabama Tuscaloosa chairman. Next slide. So from my standpoint, we'll see on March 28th, if you go back to the first slide we had, well, that one.
Yep.
Nope, go down past the flag.
Okay, right there.
Next one. Okay, that's the one. So Dr. Chris Schimmel, Executive Director for Safe State Program. He's going to do a presentation for you today. And it's a long one called Fire and Explosion Dynamics in Action. Critical behavior every safety professional must know. He said it's going to be explosive. I said I wanted fireworks. Sorry, I can't put them off in the room. So we're out of that. But we're still going to have explosive presentation, right?
Absolutely.
All yours, Dr. Schimmel.
Ready to grab minutes. All right, as on there, I am Christopher Schimmel. I am Executive Director of UA Safe State. I'm also a professor of chemical engineering and civil engineering, but I focus in fire and fire science. So any and everything you're gonna hear from me is gonna do with something that burns, okay? So one of the things I enjoy about studying fire is you get to interact with a whole bunch of different types of areas. It's much like safety, right? Safety is in all industries and all types of facilities. Fire affects all industries and all types of facilities. And in engineering, it affects all engineered systems as well. So it's kind of fun to have a skill set or a profession that you always have the opportunity to try something new, right? Work for you guys can work in almost any area, any kind of industry. So it's gives you some flexibility and ability for fun. Hope I don't kill myself on that. Speaking of a tripping hazard. All right, so today what we're going to talk about is fire and explosion dynamics in action. This it was tough coming up with a title, so then I turned to ChatGPT and I said, what would I call a presentation? And that's what it spit out as the #1 response. So Tom wanted a good one, so I'm blaming it on AI, if it's good or bad. But in any event, that really does capture what I'm talking about today. Okay, so I'm going to present some basic skills or basic fire ideas that will help you analyze safety as you go forward. So what is my main message? My main message is, hopefully at the end of this, you will see that understanding fire and explosion dynamics or behavior is critical for safety professionals in identifying facility hazards, conducting job hazard analyses, and training workers. All right, 3 very large responsibilities that each of you do or will do. And the way I'm going to get to that is by talking about fires and explosion behavior, some basics of it. No, first off, sorry. I'm going to present some data that shows you the problem that fire and explosions present to worker safety. Then I'm going to show you a few basic things about fire. Anybody here play with fire? This as a child? Yeah, good. There's always a couple. Talk to me afterwards. We get some good ideas. And then insights specifically into job hazard assessments. Okay, everybody know what a job hazard assessment is? You see that? When I see fatalities and injuries, or even loss of assets, equipment only type incidents. Often, I would say 9 times out of 10, I'd be making that up, but it does seem like the vast majority of the time. They are somehow related to a work order that was being done, some sort of work permitting process. And the job hazard assessment around that process. So today I'm gonna focus on. Not necessarily job hazard assessments, but how you can look for specific fire behavior that might affect job hazard assessments. Like I say, is my goal. So at the end of this, when you look at a situation where hot work or something similar might be being performed, hopefully you'll have a little bit more information. And then at the end, I can provide you a group of good references to turn to as well. So let's take a look at what fire and explosion does. This is one of my favorite slides here, or it's basically, it's in the chemical industry and the process industries, but 93% of all large loss incidents involve somehow a fire, explosion, or what's called a vapor cloud explosion, a weak flammable vapor that ignites and is able to propagate some sort of pressure event. So it gives us in chemical engineering in particular, a large driving force to create process safety, okay? And process safety and worker safety are linked at the hip. I just got a new hip recently, so I know hip linking pretty well. And trust me, every time I go and do process safety work, we are always set up with worker safety and facility safety. Otherwise, you really don't get good effective work done. But I've got a couple of slides here. One is basically to show you that fire and explosion problem when it comes to injury and fatality is actually rising or not going down at least, right? So whatever we're doing to protect workers with respect to fire and explosion could be improved, okay? And what I see, and I'm going to show you some case studies here, a couple. You'll see where and how a better understanding of the hazards and the behavior of these hazards would really help. And then this slide is kind of ugly, but the point of it is to show that it really is spread out what type of work people are doing when things get hit. However, hot work, repair work, and gas explosions make the most of those pieces of pie that you see, but there is a pretty good distribution, right? Fire does kind of rear its head in a couple of areas, but we are going to look at explosions and associated with hot work, and in addition to a couple other things. So how is it basically when you all go out, when you get your first job, or if you then turn to co-op, what tools do you have to look at fire? Who here has had a co-op or intern or works currently? So what have you, when you've gone through, you've seen fire hazard assessments, facility fire hazard assessments. Right? This is something that might be as simple as an egress, like an NFPA 101 type review of the facility, make sure that everybody can get out. Which there's a lot more to those than a lot of people give them credit to, right? Because of the way fire can spread and fire can create hazards. But general fire hazard assessments are one way to do it. They're generally based on codes and standards. That means they're prescriptive in nature, not performance-based in nature. They don't have a design aspect to them. They have a follow the rule aspect to them. Fire hazard risk matrices. Who knows what risk is? Without looking at the slide, tell me what risk is. Sir, in the head.
So I guess it's the opportunity for something to happen, mainly.
It's so technically it's the cost of something that happens. All right. When you buy insurance to drive your car, you're selling your personal risk to the insurance company. Right? You're buying that, giving them money, they're buying it from you. Sorry, whoever somebody's selling it, they're the ones making money on it. But you quantify risk in dollars, okay, no matter what it is. And risk is the product of the severity, or we call it engineering, the consequence of something. What is the dollar amount that it'll cost, whether it's cost of having people get killed, the cost of equipment that's lost, loss of business, it all gets lumped into a dollar value. And then we do extensive, we like to think extensive and accurate work to define probability of occurrence, right? So you take you have $1 million consequence, a 10% chance of it happening, you have $100,000 worth of risk, right? That would be where, as a company, you would turn out to the insurance market and say, I need $100,000 worth of coverage. They would view it as $100,000. They might ask some sort of, fee or something to cover you in case you get that $1 million loss. But they're counting on it only being $100,000, given the probability of it happening. And then the way where the rubber meets the road, if you will, we have the job hazard analysis. And in all my years, 30 plus, I hate to admit it, being out in the workforce, this is where workers get hurt. All right, when supervisors or the actual men or women performing the work do not understand the hazards that they're facing or have not been trained properly for the hazards they're facing. So we're talking about fire and explosion hazards. So what makes the fire a hazard? Right? Flames, right? They're hot, right? First, they give you a fire protection engineering degree right here. Fire is hot, it's bad. Water, it's good. Right? Put some fire out. Okay, you take calculus, you're done with that. You can call yourself fire protection engineer. It's a vicious joke for fire protection engineer. Sorry. Another important parameter is something called the heat release rate of the fire. Okay, so it matters how much energy something gives off. If I burn that Chick-fil-A box, it's going to burn relatively quickly, but the total amount of energy contained in it relative to burning that entire table is low. However, that's going to burn pretty quick, release a lot of energy quickly. This is going to burn a lot slower. Okay, we're going to see why here in a second. I don't really have time to discuss heat release rate in general, but it is a very important parameter when understanding fire, and especially with fire modeling and fire hazards in large areas. Fire spread is another big issue. Is it going to go either from a piece of equipment to a person? What kind of protective clothing might you need? Clearly the product of combustion, right? The CO and the other toxic things that come off of the fire. Confinement, right? A fire, if we build a bonfire out in the parking lot, right? We can all sit around and have a big party, right? We build that same bonfire in the atrium of this building, it's a completely different fire, okay? It's like putting a roof on the plume, the smoke goes everywhere. And keep in mind, even though you'll see some confinement things here, confinement can be a building, can be a room, or it can be a small case like this where equipment is, right? Confinement produces a lot worse conditions for the fire as far as toxicity is concerned. And then explosions, because Tom loves explosions, why don't we talk about explosions? But explosions really are sort of the mix of a fire that gets out of hand and a fire that gets out of hand very, very quickly. So in order, I'll make sure I'm going on time here. I'm gonna try to wrap around 12:30 if that works for everybody, okay? So flammable things burn basically in the gas phase, okay? So if you put your log in the fireplace, you gotta heat it up, you gotta get gases coming off it and they ignite. So that's where the next couple of slides are basically headed to prove to you that that is real. But flammable gases, right? If I just had a bottle of propane here and opened it up, does anybody know what a flammable limit is? Right, that is the amount of that propane that would have to mix with the air in order to create a flammable mixture. Okay, so when you strike a lighter, right, the amount of butane that's coming off of the lighter creates a flammable mixture right there. That spark is enough to ignite it, and it stabilizes the flame right above the lighter. Everybody's familiar with butane, basic organic chemistry. Do you know why butane is used in lighters and not pentane? Right? Anybody taken organic chemistry? Because butane's a lighter fluid. Get it? One less carbon. That's funny. All right, that's really funny. So anyway, we're going to show you how lower and upper flammability limits are arrived at here in a second. But some liquids are inherently dangerous, right? Flammable liquids, something like gasoline, right? If I took a bucket full of gasoline and poured it on the floor here, would you spark that butane lighter? No, right? Because that gasoline is evaporating at a rate that will form a flammable cloud. Okay, that's where flash point comes in. And based on the flash point, you determine if something is a flammable liquid or a combustible liquid. And the fire point, little bonus point here, is a flash point. If you have a cup, you heat something up and it flashes, you get a quick flash of fire across it. That's going to be one temperature. And usually several degrees higher is the fire point. So you can light it and it will actually sustain burn, right? Be able to keep that moving, sustain burn. And then solid fuels are combustible, just like something like diesel fuel is combustible, right? You took a torch, if I had my bucket of diesel fuel, took a blowtorch and put it to that, that's not gonna ignite. Okay, I can hold that torch to it for 10 minutes, and I won't be able to ignite that fluid, okay? If I heated that fluid up, you know, to, I think it's what, 140, 150 degrees Fahrenheit, then I would be able to ignite. In atmospheric conditions, I would not. The same, basically true of a piece of wood, whatever this is, right? In order to get it to burn, I have to apply some sort of outside heat force to it. Okay, now if a fire is already burning, that makes it easy, right? It's already getting out energy. But to ignite it, okay, like during a hot work incident, typically speaking, solids are the hardest to ignite. Liquids, flammable liquids, and then gases will ignite very easily. So that's what this is. Basically, I love this little diagram. We spend a lot of time on it. You can do a lot of fun math around it as well. Looking at how solids become either through melting or evaporation, with decomposition into a liquid, and then liquids evaporate or decompose into a vapor. And then again, vapors, once they're in that flammable mixture, can burn very, very quickly. The only exception to my claim that all fire takes place in the gas phase is smoldering combustion. Smoldering combustion is kind of like, think about how rust, a piece of metal will rust. It's an oxidative process taking place on the surface. It's quicker, right? And usually the hazard associated with smoldering is that it's an ignition source for something bigger. Okay, you can have a smoldering fire. Heck, you can have smoldering fires that go on for days sometimes. Nobody detects it. Smoke detector won't pick it up. But somebody opens up a wall or it reaches somewhere where it can ignite something else. So smoldering fires aren't really, they're less of a threat, but can be a threat in some conditions. So basically I want to make sure everybody has a good feel for flammability limits. So this is a bomb calorimeter. Okay, it's a big sphere, usually about a meter diameter sphere. And inside you can put mixtures of gases or dust and control it very specifically. As you can see here, we have, you pump in like 2% methane, this is methane in the air. You give it a spark with this little device. If you get a pressurized, you know you've had a reaction. You don't get a pressurized, you don't have a reaction. So you keep adding, and then about just over 4, right below 5%, pressure starts to rise. It builds until you get to the stoichiometric relationship, the perfect, from the chemical equation, the perfect amount of fuel, the perfect amount of oxygen. And then as you add additional fuel, becomes rich, the term is it's fuel rich, just like you're getting car people around, although these non-electric car people. And then you ultimately reach an upper flammability limit where there's so much fuel that once it ignites, it acts as a heat sink and pulls the energy away, and you just cannot sustain combustion. Okay, so you can either be too little, below the lower flammability limit, or too high, above the upper flammability limit. You have to be in this sweet spot in order to burn, okay? Some fuels have smaller ranges than others, but the key is any leak is basically between its pure source and where the leak isn't, somewhere in that leak space, right? If I'm leaking methane gas, pure methane gas, and there's none of it at you, somewhere between this pathway, we hit that flammable region, right? Once you hit that flammable region, it mixes everything up and can cause a much bigger explosion. And these are, the good news is you don't have to go out and get a bomb calorimeter and test this each time, right? Which would be fun. But these are tried and true, and there's a lot of this data available. There's a lot of good data available for mixtures as well. So. We know that you can get a flame, but there are different types of flames, okay? The basic flame that most of us encounter are like a candle, right? We have fuel from the candle on the inside of the cone of the candle, oxygen coming from the outside. This is when I first got my Apple Pencil, okay, so I was pretty, my art skill here. They got better. But this shows, this is called the diffusion flame. They're thin, but they're very, very hot. You're talking a couple thousand degrees Fahrenheit, right? So they put out a lot of energy, and depending on the amount of soot, they put out a lot of radiant energy as well. But dust flames, which is something that, you know, combustible and hazardous dust, something that you will have to deal with at some point in your career, are more dangerous. They're more dangerous because they're particles. They're small enough to burn quickly like a gas, but they're also solid, and they become emitters of radiative heat. So you not only get the convective type heating and some radiation that you do from a flame, but you get a heavy dose of radiative heat. So the way I like to describe this hazard is if I'm working with my grill, I don't have a grill, but if I did have a grill, everybody can envision that puff, like if you build up the gas or it delays a while and it finally lights and poof, it goes, and you know, you turn around and you might have a sooted face or your eyebrows burned off, but you're basically there, right? If that same fire, if you got hit by a dust flame that was that close, you would have second, third degree burns. Okay, so the dust is a much more hazardous fuel when it comes to workers. Not lightening the load on gas, but dust is a brings a lot to the party, brings a lot of energy to the party. And then the third type of flame we have, so we have two basic types of flames. This, the diffusion flame, which is, and then a pre-mixed flame, and then a dust flame. So I'm throwing this third one in on you. But most pre-mixed flames are things like torches, cutting torches, jet engines, cars, right? Where you pre-meter the amount of oxygen and the amount of fuel that you're going to have. So this, if this works, this is basically what a diffusion flame looks like. This is a premix flame, looks more like the burner on your stove. And good example, cutting torch. And then I use wildfire because I do a lot of work in wildfire, but any kind of natural occurring fire is basically a diffusion flame, okay? So now you basically got, if you remembered all of that, you've got most of how flames develop, okay? This is a neat video. I don't know exactly where I got this from, but I've had it for a while. And I like to show it because it's dust. And it's to walk you through how dust explosions, what they look like, and then what happens when you start to confine things, right? We mentioned that a fire inside a building is very different. Well, any kind of fire that's confined has the ability to raise the temperature quickly in that confined area, raise the pressure very quickly. So this is kind of a neat video. And I can just see one of you guys doing this at work someday, right? It's like, we gotta go train on dust, so let's all go out to the warehouse. It has some funny moments from that perspective. But they have a measured amount of dust in there and a way to suspend it, and an igniter. And they suspend it with air. And then well, that one's just showing you what they do. So they suspend it, the next one they're going to ignite it. So they do each one in real time in slow motion. So that's what the fuel cloud would be. That would be the flammable region of that dust cloud. It gets better. This time they've got an igniter in there. Okay, you can see that from the time that that's suspended, now that was just a layer that dust wouldn't burn. But since it's suspended in air and the particles can be attacked from all sides, it will burn. Now they're gonna say semi-confine this. And you can see as it vents, so that's a good feel for what venting, like on a vessel or some sort, might do, right? You have something develop inside and it can lift and vent it. This is my favorite. Even the way they look at how after they strap this on and they know the ignition's on there and they run away. I love that. same amount of fuel in each of those scenarios, okay? The only thing that changes is the degree of confinement. Right, so confinement is your enemy when it comes to dust and gas explosions. It will greatly exaggerate what they are. Okay, when you've worked or had experience, has anybody heard of the emission control program? Right, where you go through an area and you say, or if you're doing a permit for something, we're going to reduce the number of ignition sources or eliminate the ignition sources in this area, and therefore say that our risk of a fire has decreased, okay? Well, the problem with that is the ignition energies for vapors and dust is very low. For any vapor, 0.25 millijoules, no electrical engineers in here, but millijoules is a tiny amount of energy. What I have here for comparison, on a good winter's day, right, when you have dry air, walking across the room and going to shake someone's hand can transmit between 1 and 30 millijoules of energy, right? That is an ignition source nobody can get rid of. That's just not on the person. That could be a piece of equipment moving around. That can even be from pumping a hydrocarbon of some sort, and that hydrocarbon comes in touch with a grounded piece of equipment. So the idea here is that emission control programs, well, they can be a good idea. It's not a bad idea to reduce the easy ignition sources. You never really want to rely on them for a tremendous amount of control, because these energies for all of these different things are well above this relatively simple 1 millijoule energy that you can get from a static discharge from almost anything, okay? Almost anything. So that was this is my foray into sophisticating my PowerPoints. All right, now we're going to take a look at some examples of things that I have worked in the past. Anybody done any work or experience in the food industry? Food industry is great. They've got a whole bunch of fire, and especially explosion hazards, because they deal with a lot of fuel, right? Anything you eat, basically it's combustible. This is a freezer unit. These are for manufactured food, prepared food, that's what they call it. And these, when you make any kind of prepared food, you've got to make sure it's sterile, right? It's got to come out, it's got to be cooked at a very high temperature to make sure there's nothing in it. And they come out of these ovens and they're put into these freezers. And this freezer is specifically designed that in 15 minutes, the device goes in on the back side, comes out on the top side, and it goes in at almost 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And it comes out as a solid brick that you can throw against the wall and shatter, right? These freezers are cold. And they process a tremendous amount of food. And the belts that they use are very long, often a couple of miles long. Okay, so, and then when the whole process, in order when this thing comes out, these little things have to be lined up so they can get packaged, and it's all automated. So where I'm going with this is the material used in the belt is highly engineered and very specific for this application, okay? But it's a type of polymer material most people are not familiar with. See how I can run this. So this is a fire that I seen in a factory that took out a factory. It was a result of hot work. And let me first show you this one. This is, you see this plume? That's actually what's taking place here. You can see it bubbling. But if you were the fire watch doing this and you did not know about this, right? If nobody trained you on this material, you might not see that fire, right? That's a very hard fire to see. This is actual footage here. So again, I started this with a sort of the same idea of taking a look at a segment of that belt. That's the belt material, backing off to the thermal imager and showing that it is in fact burning. A couple minutes later, it's still very, very hard to see. Okay, if you weren't specifically looking for that bubbling, you wouldn't see a flame, especially in something as complicated as that freezer. And this is actually what took place. And think of the structure of that. I have one one layer of that belt. Each of these blue things you see, they're separated by about 6 inches and they're a full 5-foot run of that belt. So this is effectively a stacked Christmas tree, if you will. And here are the welders inside. And this happened to have security footage inside the freezer, go figure. But watch what happens here. The fire is actually burning at this point, from what we can tell. They recognize it. It's going in the back there behind, that's what that square is sort of representing. They recognized it, and I don't have their response. They went in, they tried to put it out, but here's another footage from that time. You see the fire in this corner here. And then watch out, it's like 2 minutes. 2 minutes, it's already made that freezer, the freezer that's probably about the size of this room, but another story and a half tall, is already untenable, meaning that people can't breathe that air. And this is spreading extraordinarily quickly. And this knocked out a factory, and it was a big deal. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage from one hot work incident. And the real key there was none of the people knew what to look for, what that slag could have ignited on that belt. They were expecting a normal flame. They were expecting they could put it out with normal fire extinguishers, and both of those were not true. Okay, so sticking with our hot work team, one good place to turn to for a lot of different things is the U.S. Chemical Safety Board. Are you all familiar with that website, USCSB? If you have worked, I was just with them on an investigation up in Louisville, Kentucky about 2 weeks ago. I think that, you know, it's a good organization in a lot of ways. They don't always get the conclusion of what happened right, but they make great videos that can be used for training, I think, that are exceptional. If they do one thing that is a true value, it is that. And they have a lot of work done on hot work and checking atmospheres for hot work. So this one that I showed here, actually what took place in Daytona, Florida. It unfortunately killed the guys that were involved here. You might have seen this video in class. This is a water tank explosion. Okay, this is a water holding tank that someone went to do hot work on and did not use a gas meter to check what we call the cold side of it, right? They were cutting a pipe off the outside, and it was an arc welder type cut, so very high energy ignition source, and they had access to the inside of the pipe. But since it was a water tank coming from a municipal water well, nobody decided that they needed to check. And this is security footage from the college across the street. All right, once he hit that welder onto that tank, methane had come up from the well, right? Not an extremely uncommon thing. And it was able to, because it was confined, right, able to lift that tank like it was a rocket until it lost stability there. So this is, and everybody I talked to on that job site, I was out there right afterwards. All of the workers were like, it's a water tank. We didn't think we even had, they didn't even have gas detectors with them because it was water, but yet it was well water. So my lesson there is anytime you're doing hot work, you got to understand the material that could catch fire, and you got to understand the atmosphere with which you are working with. All right. So now we want to get the explosions in before we run out of time. So we talked. You saw the flammable mixtures, right? We looked at that a little bit, and we looked at the our 55-gallon drum and saw that building up pressure and just the volume can create a problem with dust. It can also create a problem with vapors and gases. But if you're leaking into a process area, right? If you've driven past refineries, or if you've worked in a big chemical process area, there's always piping, there's always equipment, it's often huge networks of it, right? So this is a series of experiments we conducted in Norway a long time ago, but it basically shows how gases burn when unconfined or mildly confined, and then when severely confined. So one of the things I told you is burning rate. In fact, the Chick-fil-A box would burn quickly and the wood would burn slowly. That same thing holds with gas. If you can burn a gas quickly, it's gonna create more pressure. If it burns more slowly, it will be a little bit lazier. So this first example is mildly obstructed, fully uniform across this test bed. This is a markup of the video. So we ignite on this side. See how that just basically runs the flammable mixture, and that would be not a pleasant explosion, but that would be more of a fireball type explosion than a vapor cloud explosion. This next one, the configuration is a little different. Okay, we hold the gas up here and hit it with an ignition, but we confine it, right? So by confining it, it's allowing the pressure to build up before it breaks out of that area that it's being ignited in. You can see the difference. Okay, less fuel, more confinement. And it creates a much more powerful pressure wave. So the visual that someday when you're doing an inspection somewhere in the future is when you see a piping network or when you see a cabinet that can accumulate gas and get gas leaked into it and blow up before it escapes into another room. If this fills with gas and blows up and then escapes into this room, you get a very, very violent explosion. This is a good example of this. This is a facility in outside of Houston. These are what it looked like beforehand. One of these little chambers, these were robots that would put a coating on big valves that were used in the offshore industry. They would coat them so they wouldn't corrode. They had a leak of butylene. They used some fuel gas that was a little bit odd, but they leaked it and it got into this one room. And an explosion from that one room, because of that confinement effect, resulted in this. This is the building beforehand, and that's the building after the explosion. Okay, from one of these cells full of gas. So again, confinement is not your friend when it comes to explosion, especially with gaseous industrial. Okay, so we wanted to end with a bang. So this is one of the biggest explosions I've seen. This is anybody been to Las Vegas?
Are you talking about Petcon?
Yes.
I lived through it.
Oh,
I was knocked off my feet during the Petcon explosion.
excellent. I mean, not excellent, but that's pretty cool.
I can tell you all about it.
Well, we'll roll. This was there's two guys, you might have seen this video, two guys commentating on this. But this is right by where Hoover Dam would be outside of Las Vegas. And it's always a pilgrimage spot. My son was forced when he was younger to look out at the field where it was. I hope he appreciated it, but if not, he'll appreciate it now. But this is really one of my favorite explosions because you can see blast waves propagating huge distances from this video. A good show, story in seconds. I can't understand why I took it off the air. So there was a fire, right? And this fire then exposed this propellant.
Chemical fire that ignited at the rocket fuel manufacturer.
Sodium authority, right?
Yep. So this is the same thing that happened in Lebanon a couple of years ago, or West Texas, basically.
What they don't know is that the equipment now threatens the storage area.
So just the fire heating up the unstable solid material.
The chemicals exceed 716 degrees Fahrenheit. The entire area will combust. Then, unforgettable.
See that wave? That's textbook.
As the explosion erupts, a powerful shockwave careens across the landscape. And a car traveling along an adjacent highway is caught in the blast.
And
Multicolored smoke indicates that chemicals continue to burn, leaving one to question.
it's never good when you see a fire plume that's colored in that. That means something very. Because that second explosion was forever.
The explosion is
In
massive.
this building.
Its shockwave completely
That makes
decimates
it a marshmallow plant, I think, right next to it. So there was marshmallow.
Where were you?
I was about high school, so I was about 5 miles away, and it blew us all off our feet. Like knocked us all in the air, blew my school down.
That, this is one of the key ones on that series, because we, in turn, will do, so yeah, it blew the heck out of the place. So, but the reason I like that so much is you can see that careening pressure wave. And when we teach explosion modeling as, you know, in our process safety class for hazard assessing. One of the models we use basically, and the one that you guys will use when you do off-site release, it's mandated by OSHA, is the 1 PSI off-site pressure. It's a rule. You can't blow something up on site and propagate more than 1 PSI off-site. And that model simulates it as a symmetric explosion wave, and that is the best visual example of that I know of. So anyway, what I want to leave you with is a couple of things here. One, hopefully that you will believe me that understanding some of the basics of fire will help you dissect the hazards that you might have, okay? The hazards that you might face when you're out there. And many, and I can say again, after a very long time doing this, you see the same things kind of manifest over and over again. But understanding a fuel state, whether you're dealing with a solid, a liquid, or a gas, what type of liquid that is very important. Dust fuels, understanding how dust fuels behave and keeping them not suspended is important. Special engineered materials like that belt, even though that belt was able to take out that factory, there was really no other option to put back in, right? They had to eventually come back to that same material because it was able to perform, or engineering demands that made it perform. So we went back and did a whole bunch of different fire protection aspects on it. Hot work. Most major fires I have worked, somebody has seen start or started, right? They're like, oh crap, right? And then they try to do something about it, and the next thing you know, it takes out the facility. Anytime you're doing hot work, get your senses up. And then remember, in confinement and congestion are your enemies when it comes to this. Piping networks, buildings, any equipment housings, right? Anything that confines a fire is bad. I'm gonna pop up a group of references here, but remember us at UA Safe Site, right? For the most part, we're free to call in and use for advice under any circumstance. And that's my office number that rings through to my cell phone. I tell this to all my students. I've got 1,000+ former students out there. They all have my cell phone number. If you ever have a fire problem or a fire question, I sincerely mean it. Call me and I will talk you through it or put you with a reference for it. And this reference we'll post this presentation somewhere. But these are all very good. These are references I used, and a couple of these books on fire, these websites really provide you some good information. But sincerely, if you guys either face it in a class and you have an issue or a project, all the way down to a job a couple of years from now, and you think, hey, I remember that crazy type of fire. I will take that call or get back to you and explain to you either what's going on or where you can go to get that information. And I genuinely mean that. All right, thank you very much for your attention. I think we've been almost on time. 3 minutes over, so that's not bad. Thanks very much. You have any questions?
Hey, Chris.
Questions, right? Hang around afterwards and chat too with them.
Hey, Chris.
Nope, yep.
This is Vincent.
Yes.
I appreciate the whole presentation. There's some things in there I really want to use. I want to show this presentation to my facilities guys, especially about the hot work and all that kind of stuff. But
Yes.
Something that stood out to me was what you were talking about, risk. I've been trained on risk, been using risk forever, but it's always been used as a means of measuring something to reduce the hazard or to compare it to different scenarios. Which would you rather choose? I've never seen it. So, money, risk is money. Is this something that the insurance companies have been doing, that's one of the reasons I've had a hard time communicating with them in the past?
Absolutely. It's one of the, so the question is about risk and defining risk that way, if you didn't hear it. And yes, defining risk as money is, when I've dealt with many of the largest insurers for my clients, that's basically exactly the language they want to hear, is how you show the baseline probability and the projected cost of an incident. And then you layer in the protection systems, whether they're engineering systems, administrative systems, training systems. You show how you believe that's going to impact the probability of that event happening. And you convert that to dollar values or dollars saved. It helps not only with insurance companies, but it also helps with going to management and talking about things like return on investment, where you really don't get with safety systems, but it does give you a good way to talk money with business people.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Any other questions?
Well, y'all have to have some questions now. Y'all have answers for me, so. Come on. He just said something too, ROI, right? What have we been talking about a lot of? Making the business case. So yeah, take this and put this all together. What are some thoughts though?
I mean, I'll tell you one thing, I sell safety, I'm not a safety professional. I'm a physical therapist, but I'm in the injury prevention, safety business. And if you want people to listen to you, whether that's CEOs, owners, bosses, you eventually have to get this information into a dollar fee. If you want somebody to move on something, yes, human capital is extremely important and people are great and products are important. But until you put that into a dollar figure, you will fall on deaf ears.
I think one of the biggest realities checks I had on that was my first job out of school was with the US Department of Energy at the Savannah River site here in South Carolina. Had two huge impacts on me. One, I was a chemical engineer. I didn't know what I was getting into. I walked into a guy's office that looked like you. And I was basically with a job, a contractor that provided engineers to the Department of Energy, and then they would assign us where they needed us. I walked in, a guy looks at my paperwork, and he said, "You're a chemical engineer?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Is that like a process engineer?" I said, "Yes, sir, we do." And I began my little spiel, and he just stamps a piece of paper, says, "The fire and explosion group needs a process engineer, drive out." And the rest of my career was based on that guy's decision that day. Which I love. So he was a good guy. He put me in a direction that I really enjoyed. I really saw beyond normal chemical engineering. I was able to apply it in a lot of worlds. But what I did see there for the first time, we had cost benefit analysis for anything that we would do upgrades on. So if we wanted them to spend $100,000 to put in some sort of super duper suppression system, we had to justify that. And one of the taglines on it was the cost of a human life and how many humans you think would be killed. And back in 1994, according to the Department of Energy, human life was worth $3 million. And it was very cold and stark to see that on an Excel spreadsheet or Lotus, maybe. I don't know what it was. But it was there as a line item. Kill two people, it's $6 million. And that was part of the cost. And I guarantee you that goes on every day in every business out there and every insurance company especially. So that is a reality check. When you're like, you don't want to lose people, but in some ways, people, this is a harsh thing to say too, are often cheaper than assets, lost business time. So when they do those calculations, it can be a little disturbing if you have a human side to you.
But you'll never tell your people when you're training them at work, but that's.
That's what you want to tell you. Folks, you never will.
No, you don't, but but when you're speaking upstream and selling things, you have to speak up.
And we actually talked about that this morning, didn't we? We had a hypothetical, what if there wasn't an OSHA? Why would we want to do this? And it's return on investment, insurance claim. So this all ties in to everything we went over for 2.5 hours this morning.
Right, and there's the cost of, even if you can define every cost, the undefined cost of an incident, the loss of reputation. But it always, no matter what they say it's gonna cost, they say it's gonna cost $1 million, it's gonna be 10 more times. Yeah, it's gonna be way more than you're gonna project. ask BP with like something like the Horizon incident, right? It's just incredible costs associated with that. The fires in Los Angeles, I was just out in Los Angeles, right? The people that were responsible for that are looking at billions and billions of dollars of liability, right? It's incredibly expensive. I'll stick around afterwards if anybody wants to chat, but do feel free to reach out to anybody at Safe State. That's why we're here. And if you have fire specific issues, and when you're thinking employment at the end of your reign here, we right down the road, Tuscaloosa, and are always looking for bright young people. So let us know. Thanks very much.
And not just we're talking about life, we're talking about fatalities, and that's critically important because what doesn't get captured. It's like the impact on a family when a parent dies. You know, you've got young children, it could be generational things, so it's hard to capture that. Since you start talking to companies, the things you'll hear about a lot of times, and a lot of times maybe nobody got killed. We're doing this look, and we dropped this load, and we knocked down this, and we took out 2/3 of the project. We did this, and we started this fire, and basically the whole structure had to go away, so that was $30 million our bonding agent because we just took down those things, so. When you look at ASSP, it talks about life. It also talks about property. If you look at the basic thing of it, you know, nothing is more important than life, no matter what you want to put on it. But all these things, you know, work together. We talk so much about occupational safety and health, and that focuses on people, but it also focuses on a lot of different things. And trust me, image is part of that. When I was first out, I worked for a company. Weirdest fatality you've ever seen in your life. This company put a lot focused on family, focused on generational people working for the company. It was just a strange fatality, and you know, they couldn't find anything, so it was some weird citation. And what you saw on the paper was a big company can kill somebody for $500. You know, and the amount that the company spent on, you know, image, you know, just our commitment to our people, our commitment to the process, those things, which was all true. But, you know, they spent $1980, you know, $25,000 on local publicity to try to just prop up things that everybody already knew to be true. So those are all the factors, and those are all the things you have to do as a person that relates to people, relates to management, and begin to talk about business, because a lot of times OSHA is an issue, but it's not necessarily the issue. OSHA is minimal standards, and people forget that. You know, it's bare minimal. This is what we enforce without whatever. So there's a lot of standards out there that people aren't aware of. You know, we talk about directory instruments all the time. You gotta know how to use them. You gotta, cause they, if you don't use them properly, you lose a lot. Anyway, and with that, I'll shut up. That's what's laughing. I do know that's not true.
Yeah, we want to say thank you to everyone here today that came, and you know, we enjoy doing this, and I know this is the second time, and we've also invited UAB. They're coming in April because we do have students that do go from here over to the Masters in Industrial Hygiene and Safety program over there. So Dr. Lungu and Dr. O, they come here and visit us, and we just want to continue the relationship. We want to invite you all back. We really do appreciate y'all. It gives the students an opportunity to, you know, to see how it is, how things work. Even had some of the students here who've attended the meeting there at AGC, and so they have that frame of reference. Jackson is our president, Jackson Sweat, and I wanted to see if he had anything, if he wanted to just quickly say before.
Yeah, I was gonna say something, but Will decided to take the spotlight from me a little bit. I wanted to thank you guys a lot. I was at the last meeting that y'all did last year. Learned a ton from it. you know, as a student here, you learn all the textbook, you hear all the stuff about that, but, you'll actually show us a lot of real world stuff, and, we talk a lot about real world stuff that we don't really get to see in classrooms and stuff like that. So, I was super excited to get y'all back out here, because I know my chapter here, we learn a lot about textbooks and stuff like that, but we don't get to see the real world incidents and talk about them and things like that. So it was good for them, especially me, myself, to be able to listen and learn about the real world stuff, especially about fires and explosions, because who doesn't love a good fire and explosion there? I will say.
Anytime, I mean, anytime you're doing once, I run an engineering firm and I teach, and the time spent with students is really the only time anybody listens, right? Everybody else is worried about, no offense to the professional, they're worried about getting the report in, they're worried about satisfying the wants. You're gonna change the world, it's through you all, and I sincerely mean that, and I have spent a career of learning that, you know, the professional world is one thing, but you affect change by teaching the next generation. So, anytime.
I wanted to thank you for, you know, giving us that great presentation on fire and explosions. And I wanted to thank everybody who was in the Alabama chapter for coming out here and letting us host you. It was a great meeting.
Well, thank you. I have two things. First one is, last fall, you were gonna do a golf tournament. And you canceled it, said, oh, we're gonna do it in the spring. And we haven't heard anything since, so I hope you didn't leave us out of the loop and say, oh, we're doing it next week. Because we had mentioned we'd sponsor the drinks and so forth and actually help you out, and we were ready for that.
We had two really big storms come through and it messed the golf course up, so we're trying to figure out when construction's gonna be done on the golf course.
Got it.
So as of right now, it's March 15th is the date for the golf course or the golf tournament, but I don't think we're gonna make that because of the construction.
Okay.
Yeah, the golf course it has terrible drainage, so I know somebody down there and they basically said it wiped away. So when it flooded, it basically destroyed like 3 or 4 bridges
Okay.
out there, so that's one.
So it's kind of to be determined.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know even if the golf course is over right now. So.
Yeah, we have all of our sponsors on hold before they send us money because we don't know if they're.
Well, keep us in the loop, because we were willing to buy beverages for the
Yeah.
teams that were there, and we're gonna send people over to help, so
Yeah,
give us as much notice as you
We
can,
will.
because we like to be involved.
Yeah.
And second thing I'll mention is normally we meet on the third Friday of every month, but due to the presenter not being able to meet on the third Friday for next month, we're gonna meet on the fourth Friday in March, which is the 28th versus the 21st, due to the presenter being able to present on the 28th versus the 21st. So be aware, it will be a change next time.
And that's the week of spring break, so maybe some of you be able to break free for that.
Irondale location.
That will be the AGC Irondale location. There again, we'll be back to that location. All right. Thank you. I enjoyed coming here again. We look forward to coming next February as well. Thank you, Dr. Schimmel, for the great presentation you did today. It was explosive. I don't know what I'm gonna come up with next year for a presentation, because I want more explosiveness of it, but.
Oh, there'll be some, don't worry.
But thank you very much.
Out of your storage unit, so now that will.
I got plenty because I haven't been able to shoot them off in Birmingham. For some reason, they have a problem shooting them off. I don't know why they let people shoot off guns, but they won't let me shoot off fireworks. Anyways, but I'm surprised my house hasn't gone up with the fireworks. Confined area with a lot of explosives. But thank you, God, and we enjoyed it. Have a great rest of this weekend. I know. Well, I'm sure there's cameras around the houses that will show mine going up when it does, but safe trip to Atlanta. Get you out of here now before you hit the traffic. So thank you very much. There's a few meals left. You want to fight for it, great, or you want to draw for it, great. Whatever you'd like to do for the other 9 meals left, they're all yours.
Okay.
Thank you very much.